Interagency Meeting. We got recording started. Thanks, Suze. And as always, we've got, I think, some updated information for you this week. First on some of the administrative changes, code changes, that is. We gave you a brief overview on legislative budget last time. We've had a couple of weeks now to digest, and so a little more now from Stephanie. And then office hours for anybody who's got burning questions. We've got the whole team here ready to answer them for you. Hope everybody's having a nice summer and had a nice 4th of July break, and we are back at it. So without further ado, Stephanie, over to you. Start the agenda.
Thank you, Lee. I want to introduce Jack Gagnon, who is with our internal audit team at the Office of State Budget Management. Jack has been instrumental in overseeing the North Carolina Administrative Code changes and updates that have been made, so he is going to walk us through that. Those took effect on July 1st, and as many of you know, if you have revenue replacement grants, which many of you do, and regular non-revenue replacement grants, these rules apply. And so we want to make sure that you are aware of the changes that have been made. So thanks, Jack, for coming and helping us out.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, and glad to be here with you. Always happy to do a little presentation on the administrative code. I was promised that everyone was, in state government and was aware that what the administrative code is. If you've ever tried to give a presentation on the administrative code and the audience isn't sure, what that is, it's always difficult. So this is great to have a nice group with some good knowledge on this. And so I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights of what's been updated for July 1. And so jumping into this, there's really one big change. And so if you take away one thing today, it is that the single audit or program specific audit threshold, it has been updated. The language in the administrative code used to specify that anything over $500,000 warranted that single audit or program specific audit. Now the code aligns with the 2 CFR 200 threshold, which is currently $750,000, but is moving up to $1 million at the start of the federal fiscal year on October 1, 2024. So there used to be 3 levels of that reporting. Now it's just 2. You're either at that single audit threshold or you're not. And so this was just to kind of streamline things and to kind of help align that with that 2 CFR 200, trying to alleviate the confusion on, hey, the state has one audit threshold and the federal have a different. And so now they are the same, and it is based on that 2 CFR 200, which I am sure many of you are very familiar with on this call. And so that is really the first big change, is that there's no longer 3 tiers. There are simply 2 levels. And again, the audit is still, needs to be with that state agency no later than 9 months after the recipient's fiscal year. So, no changes on that. And so that, just the changes in the dollar amount on the threshold there. And then, so that's really the big one. If you take away anything from today, that is it right there. And then moving on to our next item. I know many of you work in grants, and this may seem common knowledge or already best practice, but communicating as it relates to non-compliance with rules. And so communicating this in writing to the non-state entity within 30 business days, and then also requiring a response in writing from that entity, your grantee, so to speak. And so I know, many of you probably were already doing this. This is now just in the code. I'm sure some of you may have heard the nightmare stories of, we alerted them on the phone and it becomes this he said, she said situation. This is just to make sure that everyone knows to, put that non-compliance in writing to that grantee, and then also request a response of, how are they going to remedy these issues and things of that nature, just to kind of start that conversation. Just very important to kind of create that that trail, if you will, of creating that, notifying them of that non-compliance. And so again, that may not be, new to anybody, but it is now, specifically in the code, and does, kind of, need to be documented, via email or, however you prefer that. And then next, this is just one here on the suspension of funding list. I think we, all do a great job of making sure we put folks on the suspension of funding list when there are unfortunate issues that come up. But the important thing is to also, let OSBM know to remove entities from the suspension of funding list. A lot of times folks go on and never come off. And so we do just want a friendly reminder, there is now number 12 there, notify the Office of State Budget and Management when to remove entities from the suspension of funding list. And there also used to be an OSBM responsibility section when we were working with our friends over at AOH that handles the rules. Actually, you can't make rules about your own organization, and so that actually got struck. So don't be alarmed that there's no longer any OSBM responsibilities in that. We still very much involved in this, but don't be alarmed by that change. And then, so those are the real big changes there. There are also some minor adjustments that probably don't warrant as much attention. There's definitely some new definitions in that first section. Just from a lot of questions that I'm sure you as grants folks also receive. Stuff like we added monitoring plan and things like that, just to kind of create a little bit of clarity. Just an example here, we got the definition of monitoring plan. And then down at recipient and subrecipient responsibilities, there's some new language in that quotations. Purpose is outlined in the contract. It used to just say intended purpose. And as many of you know, that sometimes the budget is simply a name of an organization and a dollar amount, and it's kind of hard to, kind of figure out what the intended purpose is. And so there's kind of throughout the, the update here, a renewed emphasis on the contract and the terms of the contract, and kind of what your grantee, informs you of on that scope of work of what those funds were going to be spent on. So just kind of a renewed emphasis on the contract. And then again, you'll kind of see this throughout on 703, those required contract provisions. Those are all still there, but we did want to specify that those are applicable to all subrecipient or recipient subrecipient relationships. So sometimes as we make it down to that next layer, some things get lost in translation. Just to put an emphasis on, just subrecipients aren't, everything that applies to the recipient would also apply to the subrecipient. I know sometimes, things can get lost in translation or weren't, communicated to some subrecipients. And I'm sure we've all been in that situation before. And so just wanted to put an emphasis on that. And so, really, nothing too earth-shattering on the updates, mostly just trying to add some clarity, and just based on experiences that we've had as many of, and I know we heard from a lot of y'all throughout this public process about kind of the issues that you've run into before and things of that nature. And so we did try to, specify, not in an overly prescriptive way, but to, try to just bring some clarity on some of those items. And so that's all I have from a presentation perspective. I will say, I think the most important thing just to be aware of is this kind of shift on the threshold. And I do think, this went into effect on July 1. And then just to be aware of that in August 1, the threshold does go up. Again, there's not going to be many folks, that are in between that 750 and $1 million. That may, kind of fall into that gray area. But again, it's based on the recipient's fiscal year. And so, if they're, if they, receive, hold, or use or expend those grant funds in that $1 million amount, in their fiscal year, that's what's going to warrant that single book, that yellow book single audit or program specific audit. So definitely just trying to draw some emphasis there. And so that's all I have, Stephanie. Happy to answer any questions. I know, hopefully I can, help anyone else that got any questions on that. And again, this is posted on the OSBM website as well as the Administrative Office of Hearing. If you, Google, 03 NCAC 09, this, all the new language is up there and is posted. So just wanted to kind of more of an awareness campaign at this point.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. So Jack may not be able to stay for a whole meeting. So if you have questions about this part of it, can you please, let's take a few minutes and ask them now. Okay, great. I see we have one. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Lisa with the HHS. So we have quite a few of these, and I'm just kind of wondering about the timing. So let's say we have a subrecipient right now with a current contract, and because it is their fiscal year end date, let's say they have a 9/30 fiscal year end. And their contract was done when they had the $500,000 threshold. So when does this actually change? Is it within their contract period? Are we held responsible for, let's say they're getting 600,000 and their contract ends 9/30 or their fiscal year end? Do we still hold them to the 500,000, or how do we shift? At what point do we shift this threshold?
Gotcha. Yes. So this is effective as of July 1, 2024. And so I do think this is effective now as it stands. I do understand on the kind of the contract obligations there. It is I know you kind of mentioned the amount of money there. So if anything, they may be off the hook technically by the administrative code. From a requirement of the administrative code. Now, if your contract specified that they were doing it at 500,000, if you would still like them to stick to that contract, I think there's definitely some discretion. But this is effective July 1, 2024. I think if you reference the code in the contract, they may be off the hook. But if you specified it, as 500,000 and still want that single audit, I think they're definitely held to the contract that they agreed with y'all on. But this code here is effective July 1.
So I do think we had the 500,000 in our contracts. Are we required to hold them to that? Is that a legal question, or do we go with what the state statute currently is?
Yeah. I would maybe loop in your attorneys. You may, have some flexibility there on the contract. As it stands with the, compliance with administrative code, you'll probably be fine from a, compliance with the code perspective. But again, from a contract perspective, if you've got like a legal folk, I would always kind of loop them on and see what they think of that. There's probably definitely some cost benefit. Is there a reason why you would still need the audit report and things of that nature? But from a compliance with the code, it did go July 1. And so, that's the effective date on that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Lisa, when you get a legal opinion from your general counsel, can you share that with the rest of us, please?
Sure.
Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Jack, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, glad to join y'all. Thank you so much.
And we know how to find them in case you don't, if you have more questions. So we'll be happy to help you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely happy to help. Just feel free to reach out anytime.
Thanks, Jack. So on the next part of our agenda, we thought we sort of knew what was going on 2 weeks ago, and now we have made more progress. So those of you who may have seen or paid attention, Senate Bill 357, which I think is Session Law 2024-40, did reappropriate some of our SFRF dollars. And so for those of you impacted by that, we will be going back in and modifying MOUs. For most agencies, I think, with the exception of one, the decrease in your grants is just money you were going to return anyway. We went through part of that with the budget process. And so that should not be a surprise. We will go modify your MOUs. And then probably the biggest change was for DEQ, having a swap out with money from the general fund versus SFRF and DEQ. I know y'all are already well aware because we're well underway of figuring out how those programs are going to be swapped and which specific sub-recipients will be swapped. So that's no surprise there. And then we met with DHHS, so thank you for that, with the additional childcare funding that they got. And I think there's a couple questions that a few agencies still have and some issues that we're going to work through. So we'll continue to do that work. From a perspective of U.S. Treasury, and in fact, we were all a little bit late to this call because we were all meeting with our partners in other states who are in budget offices and handle these federal funds. We have gotten a little bit more guidance from Treasury. We have a big report due to them on July 31st, and we now sort of understand. We have some questions about it with how we're going to fully obligate all of our funds. We know the MOUs count with state agencies, so we just have to figure out how their reporting portal is going to work. And in classic Treasury fashion, there's still a couple of questions about it. But it is still important, and we are still moving towards that December 31st, 2024 deadline to make sure all of our MOUs are lined up. So any of these new legislative budget changes we will have to make to your MOUs, they'll need to be signed and everything sort of figured out. We don't think we'll be able to get that finished by July 31st for this reporting quarter for Treasury, but we do want to make sure we get it done no later than mid-August. And so that is sort of the approach we're taking. That's the new timeline we have based on the latest guidance, based on the legislative changes. I welcome any questions or comments or concerns that you may have and how it impacts you. I would just say thank you for your time and your attention to this as we work to make sure we have everything sort of sorted out. And if you have questions about your specific SFRF appropriations or any obligation questions or things like that, please let us know. We're finding some weird idiosyncrasies between the Treasury and state instructions that we just need to make sure are sorted out. But I think we've communicated with every state agency if we have a challenge or if you have a challenge. And so we are trying to coordinate our efforts and making sure we're communicating to everyone that needs to know about it so we can get anything resolved. And again, work towards our obligation deadline of the end of this calendar year, really shooting for August, knowing that Treasury may make some more weird changes to the portal and we don't want to be stuck at the last minute trying to figure out our appropriation side when we're trying to figure out the Treasury side. So that was, I think, the end of our agenda for new updates and stuff we need to talk to you about. And we are going to stay on the line for office hours. So if you have any questions or concerns or need project-specific information and help, please let us know. We'll be here.
Hey guys, could I get is there a place where I could find